December 1997, the end of another year. Last video, I talked about meeting Jane, a young lady who would become my best friend and my worst enemy. But at this point, we were brand new friends and we had connected over books. And so we exchanged books. We suggested things to read. From favorite novels to things we enjoyed when we were younger. And so, not many books this month, and 3 out of the 5 were all recommended by Jane. Excuse me, I guess we'll start off right now. The first book that I read in December of 1997 was The Summer Tree by Guy Gavriel K. I don't know if that's how you say his name. The Guy part and the K part, pretty sure about. It's the Gavriel, not sure. Anyway, The Summer Tree. This is the first book in the Fionavar Tapestry, which is a trilogy. It's a fantasy series. And this was a favorite fantasy series of Jane, so she lent me the 3 books. And this is the first one. So there's 5 friends, college friends, and they go to some lecture, something, and they meet up with the guy that was given the talk, whatever it was, afterwards, and it turns out he is a mage from another land, Fionavar, and it's the 50th anniversary of the reign of the current king, and he invites these 5 friends to go to this fantasy world, because they're in the real world, and Fionavar is the first world. All other worlds in the multiverse, or whatever you'd want to call it, are based on Fionavar. And so these 5 friends, just normal human people, go to this fantasy world with, magic and unicorns and dragons and elves and fairies and all your typical stuff in fantasy. And they basically all have some sort of role to play because it's that kind of book. They're going to have some kind of role to play in this grand battle. And there's someone called the Unraveler who has awakened, and he's going to not only destroy Fionavar, but all of the other worlds in the Tapestry of Worlds. And I enjoyed this. It's the most basic way to put it is it's kind of Lord of the Rings light. It's that epic, sprawling fantasy. The biggest difference is that there are human characters from the real world who go to this fantasy world. But it could be Middle Earth. It's that type of world. But the writing is not as dense, I would say, as J.R.R. Tolkien. But anyway, that's the first book in the Fionavar Tapestry, and the first book that I read in December of 1997, The Summer Tree. Then I stepped away from that for a little bit. The second book that I read was The Lost Get Back Boogie by James Lee Burke. And this is, I believe James Lee Burke has some series of books, but this is a standalone. It's about an ex-con named Iry, I-R-Y, P-A-R-E-T-S. Iry Peretz? I don't know. Anyway, he's an ex-con. He goes to work at a ranch that's owned by the father of someone he was friends with in prison, and he just gets caught up in all the drama at this ranch and the ranch's rivals and this stuff, all while he's trying to write some song called the Get Back Boogie. I know James Lee Burke is very popular. This is not a book that did a lot for me. I don't know that we're ever going to see, not going to make any promises, But I don't know that we're ever going to see any other James Lee Burke on this list. So let's move on to book 3 for December of 1997, and that is The Wandering Fire by Guy Gavriel Kay. Book 2 of the Fiona of Our tapestry, and it's basically just a continuation of the story. The first book had a cliffhanger ending, and so you want to jump right into book 2, and it's more fantasy stuff, more of the 5 human characters discovering what their roles are, and they're not necessarily all heroic roles. And the Unraveler gaining power. So it's a middle book in a trilogy. And then book number 4 for December 1997, The Darkest Road by Guy Gavriel Kay. I just finished it right off with book 3, and this is the culmination of the story. The Unraveler is going to be at the height of their power with their armies. Everybody, the 5 human characters are all going to solidify what their roles are, and the climactic battle. Is good going to win? Is evil going to win? Who's going to survive? That kind of story. I think it's a good trilogy. I read The Hobbit when I was young. I've never been able to get into Lord of the Rings. I find it's too dense for me. There's too much world building for me. There's just too much. And I think the Guy Gavriel Kay has the right amount of world building, because he does build it up, but it's not as incredibly dense as Tolkien's books. That's just my opinion. I know they're beloved. I just couldn't get into them. So, that's the third book in the Fiona of Our tapestry, The Darkest Road, Guy Gavriel Kay. And then the final book, just 5 books in December. I had a burgeoning? Am I saying that? It sounds weird to me when I say it. Friendship with Jane. So I didn't, plus the fantasy books were, pretty thick. But anyway, the last book that I read in December of 1997 was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Coyote Moon by John Vornholt. And this is, I believe it takes place between season 1 and season 2 of Buffy. There's a carnival in town. Buffy thinks there's something strange about the carnival. Willow and Xander kind of fall for a couple of carnival workers. So they're ignoring Buffy, and there are coyotes in town, not acting very coyote-ish. So Buffy's got to figure out what's going on, why there's coyotes attacking other animals and people. And it's a light, very quick Buffy the Vampire Slayer story. If you're a big fan of the show, you probably enjoy this book. If you're not a fan of the show, why would you be reading a Buffy the Vampire Slayer book? It would be fine. I mean, I don't think you're gonna love it, but I don't think you're gonna hate it either. If you're not a fan of the show, if you're a fan of the show, I think you're really gonna like it. Very nice, light, quick visit. I find it's always fun to visit characters that I like from TV. There's no new episodes right now. I've got this book I can read. So Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Coyote Moon by John Vornholt. And that was the last book that I read in December of 1997. Looking ahead, January is even fewer books. But then it starts picking up again. I guess the question for this video would be, what is your, it's sort of a slash question. What is your favorite fantasy book or series? / who is your favorite fantasy author? If you read fantasy or have read fantasy. For me, I guess it would come down to how you're going to define fantasy. If pulpy sword and sorcery type stuff is going to be part of this, then I would have to go with Robert E. Howard and Conan. Solomon Kane is my favorite Robert E. Howard character, but I'm not sure I could stretch the fantasy definition to fit Solomon Kane. So if I can stretch it to sword and sorcery kind of stuff and pulpy stuff, absolutely Conan by Robert E. Howard. If you're not going to allow that, I would say back in the day, way back in the 80s, I would have said Piers Anthony in the Xanth series. But that no longer holds true. So, I don't know. Other than the Conan answer, I don't read a lot of fantasy anymore. Jonathan Mayberry has a new fantasy series. The first 2 books are out, but I haven't read those yet. Victor Gischler has some fantasy stuff. I have some of that, but I haven't read it yet. And like I said, I've read The Hobbit, but couldn't get into Lord of the Rings, so I certainly can't name any of that or J.R.R. Tolkien. Excuse me. So I think I have to stick with David Eddings was good. The Belgariad series, 5-book series that I talk about way back at the beginning of this video series. So I was reading them in 84 and 85. So there is some of that way back when. I think that's the best I can answer. I haven't read Joe Abercrombie. I never got into Robert Jordan or Brandon Sanderson. Or, any of the other myriad, many fantasy writers. At least nothing's coming to mind. So I'm going to stick. You can tell me I'm wrong in the comments if Conan doesn't count. But that's what I'm sticking with at the moment. It's. I guess it depends, because I think when we're talking, when we're talking fantasy like Lord of the Rings, that's your orcs and your elves and your ents and other things that start with vowels. And Conan doesn't really have much of that. It does have mythical or magical creatures, and there are sorcerers, but I don't remember any elves in Conan stuff. So it's a different kind of fantasy. Whatever. Let me know what you think. What are your favorite? What's your favorite fantasy book /series /author? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here on my channel. I almost said the low budget review show, but that's not one of these videos. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, please, before I get to that, see, I got all thrown off. Please like, share, and subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. Now, if you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronan5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is Eric Smith 5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH 5757. That's all I've got for you this week. So until next week, read more books.